Today, I am talking about a very important topic. And my guest is Kelly Daugherty. She is a seasoned expert to help people understand how to deal with grief. And it doesn't really matter what time of year it is. As we move through the grief process, there are things that we need to know that can help us not only support ourselves better, but support those around us who are going through the grief process. And so it's a serious topic today, but one that is very important. Kelly, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be talking about this with you.
Yeah, it is such an important thing to talk about because grief can strike at any moment for any reason. There is no time limit. There is no, and we also aren't really taught how to express ourselves when we're dealing with grief.
Exactly.
I'd love it. I know we had talked a little bit earlier and you had shared that you have a personal experience with grief and loss. If you would share that with us to just get this topic started.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was 14 years old, my mom died from breast cancer. She had been sick for about 2.5 years. And obviously, as a 14-year-old female going through teenage years anyway, had just started a new high school and actually an all girls Catholic high school. So very different. And my life really just fell apart in a lot of different ways. I was really struggling. After that, I was living with my sisters at the time when my mom died, but then shortly after they moved out. So it was just me and my dad. And that was a challenging relationship to begin with. And then with my mom not being there, it just things really fell apart. And so my dad fortunately knew that I was struggling and wound up getting me into grief counseling with a local hospice. And I met an amazing social worker there, and I met girls that understood what I was going through. And I finally felt like I wasn't alone in my grief, because up until that point, I really felt like I was the only one that had gone through a loss like this, which is not
Mm.
true at all. We know now 1 in 12 children will have a parent or a sibling die by the time they're 18 years old. But I didn't know that at 14 years old. And so being able to go to that group and connect with those other girls really changed my life. And after that, I started volunteering with the children's groups. The social worker asked me to help. And that's when I knew that this is what I wanted to do with my life. So I went and got my master's in social work. And now I'm in private practice where I specialize in grief and loss.
Wow. And first of all, I'm so sorry for your loss. The loss of a parent at any time, but especially during those tender years, has to be such a challenge.
Exactly.
And I think that one of the issues that we run into is we're not taught how to grieve. We're not taught how, like, it is okay to experience this. Can you share a little bit about what it means to really understand how to grieve and why it's important to grieve, why we don't want to just lock that down and set it behind a wall?
Absolutely. Grief is a normal, natural response to loss, right? And obviously, I'm sharing my story about the death of my mom with bereavement, but grief is really the loss of so many different things. When, maybe when you get fired from a job, you have the grief from that. Maybe when somebody moves away or when you move to a new area. We talked about you moving to Texas, and I'm sure there were some big, obviously huge changes from coming from the Northeast. And
Yeah.
so there's grief with all sorts of losses, missed divorces, end of relationships, ends of friendships. And we don't talk enough about that. We always tend to think that grief is like this just about death, but it's really not. It's really about any loss. And it's a normal, natural response. It is something that we are going to feel. And unfortunately, we aren't taught about what grief is and how to grieve. And so people try to compartmentalize it and try to bury it. And then there's a lot of people that have what we call delayed grief, where it comes back years later. I know someone personally, it took 30 years for him to finally deal with the death of a child. And it took him facing his own mortality to finally lean into that grief and deal with it. Because grief is hard. Nobody wants to feel this. It's really difficult. And so, yeah, what do we want to do in our society? We want to avoid, right? And push away the bad, right? But the reality is you can't. Grief is something that you need to experience, you need to lean into, you need to feel. And grief isn't something you're going to get over. It's something you learn to live with and integrate into your life.
Mhm.
And I think the more that we can talk about death and dying and grief, the better equipped we're all going to be able to deal with it ourselves and also to be able to help someone else so we don't give those cliched responses, oh, it was God's will, or they're better off. For somebody grieving, those statements are not usually very helpful and they're actually hurtful. And I hear so many times with my clients, what they talk about is the lack of support that they get from their friends and family. And until I think you've really experienced a significant loss in your life, you may not understand what grief really feels like. So you don't always know what to do or what to say. And what I hear a lot of times with my clients, now I know, oh gosh, I should have never said that to that person. And I know moving forward, I will never say that again.
And I love that you talk about the fact that grief can be for any reason. It's not just the loss of someone important to us or even a pet, like the loss of a pet.
Exactly.
It's so, that's a big thing. They're in our lives for such a short period of time, but boy, do we love them. But like you said, a move, a change, there are all kinds of things that can engender that. And so I wonder too, if you can address for just a second the fact that the grief journey is different for everyone, because I think sometimes it feels so isolating that you stop talking about it because the impression you get from people around you is, aren't you over that yet?
Exactly. Exactly. Because grief is unique. And unfortunately, I think what our society believes is that there's these 5 stages that we're going to go through, right? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross developed this a very long time ago, I think in 1969, and it was for people who were dying. And somehow our society has made this what we should go by. Okay, now you're in that denial stage. Now you're in that anger stage, which is just not accurate and it's not helpful. And it can make really people think that they're doing their grief wrong because grief is so unique. And that's why I'm a big proponent of not using the 5 stages, because grief is so individualized and the 5 stages doesn't take that into account. It doesn't take into cultural factors, spiritual factors. It doesn't help you be able to assess for maybe clients that need a higher level of care or need more intensive services. It just put us in a box, and it makes us think that this grief is this neat, orderly thing, which it's not. It's a hot mess, really, what it comes down to it. One moment you're going to be laughing, and then the next minute you could be in tears crying because you just heard the song on the radio, or you drive past their favorite restaurant or somewhere that you went with somebody, and boom, you're hit with that grief burst and that overwhelming feeling of grief. And does it change over time? Yes, but it doesn't mean that it gets smaller. We just grow bigger than our grief. We grow through our grief and around our grief. But our grief is always there. It's still there. Last year, I wrote a chapter in a book, and I wrote about the death of my mom. And okay, it's been 29 years. I talk about this all the time. I'm fine. I was a hot mess from writing that chapter because it was like, it just brought back up so much. And it was just such a good reminder for me that grief isn't something that goes away. It's something we learn to integrate and live with, but it's still there. There's a really good kids book that I use. It's called The Grief Rock, and it talks about how we carry this rock around all the time, and it's such an important thing. Sometimes that rock feels smaller, but sometimes it can feel really big. And grief is just so unique and individualized.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I also think there don't seem to be a lot of resources that provide tools or strategies to help us. How does someone find that? Like, how do they reach out to find ways to help them, especially at the beginning? Obviously, we need a lot of support then, but not just then. As we move through the process, it can be 6 months, a year, 10 years, like you said, 29 years for you. There have to be tools in place to help us deal with that.
Absolutely. And I think it varies. Most hospices have bereavement programs in place. They offer free grief counseling. These professionals I've worked at 2 hospices in my career. They are grief informed professionals. They understand grief. They offer grief groups, individual counseling, obviously all over social media. There's different groups you can join. There's some really good books out there that I love. I think there's tools like journaling can be really beneficial. I have a book coming out in February, which I'm really excited about because it's a collaborative book. So there's 25 authors in it, and each author shares their own personal story of grief, and they're all different kinds of losses, which is what I really wanted. I wanted whoever picks up this book is going to be able to relate to at least one of those authors. But then the author shares tools that can help you on your grief journey. And I think that's really what's so important, because what's going to work for me isn't going to work for you. Like, I have a running group that I do here. We have our grief group for the first hour, and then we train for a 5K. And at the end of the 7 sessions, we all run a 5K together. Obviously, that group is not for everybody. People are like, oh, Kelly, I hate running. And I'm like, well, you can walk. Like, some people walk, some people run, but you have to find what works for you. And so if you do seek out counseling from a therapist or a grief coach, make sure that they're grief informed. Ask them questions. Find out, what experience do you have with maybe overdose loss or suicide loss? Because you want to make sure you're getting somebody that understands what you're going through. Not that they have to personally understand it, but that they're grief informed and have the tools and resources to support you. And then there's obviously some really great websites. One of my favorite one is called what'syourgrief.com. Lisa and Eleanor are amazing. They have a ton of resources on their site. They have classes and workshops and trainings as well. So there is some really great resources out there. You just have to maybe look a little bit.
Yeah. And I so appreciate your sharing this, because as I said at the beginning, I think unfortunately, at least in this country, we don't really have a culture that supports the concept of grieving. And it is a very important conversation. I know you have a self-care course for people. Can you share just a little bit about that so they can learn more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of my chapter for the book that's coming out, and so I wanted to be able to offer something additional to the readers. And so it's a free course. It's on my Center for Informed Grief website. And there you can download the self-care plan, and then you can also sign up for the course. And it's 10 different modules, and it goes through all different things like physical well-being, making sure that you have good sleep hygiene, that you're eating what you need to be eating, getting enough water, things that maybe when we're grieving, we don't always focus on because we have grief brain. Maybe we can't remember things. Maybe we're having difficulty focusing and concentrating. So being able to have kind of a list of things that you need to make sure that you're doing for yourself. So I also talk about meditation and mindfulness and self-compassion and all of these things that can really help, especially if you're getting caught in the guilt with the coulda, woulda, shouldas, right? I should have said this to them, or I shouldn't have done this, or I should have been there. And then we get caught on that guilt piece. And so really being able to practice that self-compassion and that mindfulness and being kind to yourself. So the self-care course really includes all of those things. There's meditations in there to practice. There's all different things to look at, all different ways. And obviously, like I said before, they may not all align with you, and that's okay. Find what works for you and keep using it. And just because you use, say, like I teach EFT, emotional freedom technique, or tapping in it, try it once. And if it doesn't work, try it again, because you never know. It might work another day. I think we're very quick to be like, oh, that didn't work, and not try it again. But neuroplasticity, neurons that fire together, wire together. We have to keep doing things over and over again to build those neural pathways in our brain and to get really good at them.
That sounds like such a good idea, to try new things. And if it doesn't work one time, give it a little more time. I think that because some of it depends on where you are at the moment or how you're feeling. And so perhaps a reset or a reframe to a different time, space, mood, mind can definitely be helpful. Kelly, thank you so much for being here. This has been really wonderful. Thank you for contributing to this important conversation and topic. And for everybody who's watching, Kelly mentioned some really great resources. I will make sure to put them all down below so you can check them out. And don't forget to check out her free course on self-care. I will make sure that link is down there as well. And Kelly, thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
For everybody who is watching, please remember, as always, in all you do, make today a healthy day. Bye, folks.